Hey guys, in today's video we're doing some lap joints with some sheet metal. It's kind of thick sheet metal, it's 16 gauge, but I saw Jody do a video a while back doing butt welds on thin sheet metal, and then I saw Bob Moffett do a T-joint on 16 gauge, so I figured might as well do a lap joint. So on this first one, I didn't have any ER70S2 in 040 size, so I just used my 308 filler rod and kind of pretended like it was stainless. Don't ever use 308 on mild steel if it's something other than just practice. And then I used 16th inch ER70S2 for this. I used a number 6 on this gray one, and then I showed you what a ferric cup would do on your regular mild steel. Anyways, let's get to it. You do not want your filler to look like it did in this video. The only reason it looked like that is because it was the only angle I could feed my rod in. I sanded it, and then I filed the edges, wiped everything with alcohol on the back and the front, because if it's got oil on the back when you start welding, it'll start burning out and that can contaminate your weld. When I'm tacking it together, I like to use a small cup on thin sheet metal and stainless. And the reason I do that is so I can use the edge of my cup to push down on it and pin it in, and then I'll tilt it up until the tungsten's in the right spot, and then I'll tack. And the smaller cup you have, the closer to your tungsten this piece will be pushed down. If you have a large cup and you're pushing out here with the edge of it, over here's where you're going to be tacking, and there's going to be a gap. Oh, another thing, especially on stainless, if your bare hands touch the stainless before you start welding, your fingerprints will be left in there, and it can contaminate it. I mean, it's really not that bad unless it's like an X-ray quality weld, but your fingerprints will be on there, so then you can see that. You won't have a nice clean haze line all the way around. So I like to find a spot that I'm going to start tacking at. I'll pick one where you can actually see me. Alright, let's start right here. So what I'm going to do is right on the edge, I'm pushing down on the top piece. I'll point my tungsten right in at the corner that I want to tack into. And I don't use filler on my sheet metal, because the more filler you add, the harder it is to weld over it and have it look smooth, and it holds just fine. So I'm pressing down on that, make sure it's in the right spot, and then I'm going to line up. And I just do enough for it to fuse that bottom. And I usually tack about on sheet metal every inch or inch and a half. So I'm going to push down again right there. And I'm basically just burning that corner down into it. And when you're tacking, especially thin parts, especially if you're going to be autogenously welding it, you know, no filler, you really want to have no gap. And the way to do it best is to, from where you started, you push down and tack and walk it out, and you'll walk that gap out. Because if you tack down here and try to walk it back, you're going to have to smack it with a hammer or something to get it to come down, and it's always going to have that gap in the center. So, I don't know if you can see it, but it's over 1/16 of an inch gap here. So all I'm going to do, push down here, and I usually have like a screwdriver or something to help hold down right here, and then it's the same thing. Just basically burn that top edge down into it. And then what I like to do on the edges, I'll actually come in from the side like this, especially on a butt weld, and that seems to keep it from horseshoeing out on you. And a lot of times I'll do what we always call the double tap, where you hit it, and you're just doing full pedal. And usually within 2 times it'll come together. If not, it's probably got too much of a gap. Now this side's already pressed down, so I can just use with the edge of my cup. And you want to have nice silver tacks. They're much easier to weld over if you get them like that. That's how I like to tack them up. So this is the difference between a Ferric BBW on here using 16th inch ER70S 2 wire and using a number 6 gas lens. This is just as strong as that one's gonna be, but that one has the pretty colors. I'll show you a fusion weld. So basically on a fusion weld, you want to have it pointed up kind of like this. You don't want to be in at a 45 like a fillet. You want it up here, and you're just burning that edge down into it, and it's almost using this top edge as filler. On sheet metal, that's usually plenty strong. It's just doing a fusion weld or an autogenious weld. So to do an autogenious weld on pretty much anything, you gotta have virtually no gap. If you have a big gap, like right here, it probably would eat away. And so when you're welding, this edge will start eating away and backing up in here. So when you get done welding, you'll have kind of a, like you've chased it in. But all you're doing is melting that edge off and letting it roll down. And once it makes contact with the bed, or this base material right here, then you can start flowing and just let it do that same thing, eating the same amount off of that edge as it rolls down. So there's the autogenious welds. You see how this one's smooth right here? It's got a nice shape to it. This is what you want on an autogenious weld. See this one, how I didn't eat enough of that lip away, so now it's got a ridge there. You want to kind of flow enough of that material down so it almost acts as filler, and it will beef up that fillet right there. So here's that weld. right here is where I touched, and I had to sharpen my tungsten and then restart. It's really tricky trying to come in from the side while the camera's, because the camera's in the spot where I like to be welding. So it's kind of a pain in the butt, but hopefully you could see that good enough to see what I was doing here. So that was that first one, and then on the second one, I backstepped into that one. And then same with that third. You can see there's a couple spots where I burnt through, especially when I was running the camera. The other thing I wanted to say is you do not want your filler to look like it did in this video. The only reason it looked like that is because it was the only angle I could feed my rod in. So when you're doing a lap joint, you want your rod to come in at about this angle so that it's about 90 degrees from here to here, and it's just on this side of it. You don't want it over here, and you don't want it too far this way. All of these ways will cause problems. The only way I could do it with the camera was from this angle, which is completely sideways into it. So it's really hard to hit that puddle, and as you're coming in, this arc is starting to melt your filler as it comes in, so it's already balling up, and you don't want it to ball up. You want to be able to just push it straight into that puddle, and then straight in and straight in. Alright guys, that does it for today's video. Hopefully you got some good tips on some thin sheet metal. Give me a thumbs up if this helped you. Subscribe if you're not, and hit that bell, that way you get notified every time I upload a video like this. Check out some of my other videos. Alright guys, have a good one.